My grandfather, James Dukelow, and his wife, Elizabeth Dukelow, came to Hutchinson when my father was about 1 or 2 years old, I think, as far as I've been told. My grandfather came to Boston. He was a school teacher in Ireland, and it was during the time of the famine, and he went from where he lived in Durham near the ocean and took a railroad like all the other immigrants did to this one central place in Ireland where they boarded a train. They boarded the train to the harbor, and they took small boats out to the ships that were taking them to America. He was educated because he had fell from an apple tree or a fence near an apple tree. His parents had a fruit farm overlooking Durham Bay, and he fell, and they were going to take off his leg, amputate his leg, and the lady and the lord of the manor decided that he couldn't do physical work much, so he should be educated, and he was educated with their son, and that's why he was so well educated. He came to Boston and met Elizabeth Justice. Her family went back to the East Way, piano and organ people. He worked for A&P. A&P had Atlantic Pacific grocery store. They hired people from England and Ireland to test their teas, because I guess they thought they drank so much tea they would know what was a good tea. Then later he worked for them to scout out in the West to build a new grocery stores. And he came to Hutchinson, and when he was there to see about a store, he did some hiking. He loved to hike, even though he was rather limped when he hiked. He went out and found a homestead that the man didn't want to keep the homestead going. So he bought the homestead from the man and finished up the homestead. And it was out west of Hutchinson, Kansas, in Reno County. He went back to the Boston and got his wife and children, their 2 boys. And they had lost a boy from milk fever in Boston. And that was the time when bad milk, that's why so many mothers nursed their babies till they were 2 and 3 years old, so they wouldn't have to give them milk, which might kill them. He was buried in Boston, but Boston, which most people don't realize, was extended just like Holland did, extended their land, and eventually it went completely over the huge cemetery where the baby boy was, I guess he was about 2 years old, the little boy was buried. In Hutchinson, he began a fruit farm. He came from a fruit farm in Ireland. His parents had fruit farm, and he was supposedly, the story is that he was extremely, almost a genius in everything, especially math. And supposedly, we have so many math people in the Dukelows, and supposedly a lot of the genes must have come from him. He had a fruit farm at that time in Kansas. There was no blights that got on the trees. Eventually they were introduced through cedar trees, and there were no insects. No one had to spray for anything that would harm vegetation. And he was so good at growing fruit that he entered at the World's Fair and got the grand prize one year. I kind of think it was Chicago, but I'm not sure. He planted many, many orchards. He must have made a lot of money, because my dad said he paid cash for his 2 older sons to have a complete big farmhouse and farm. He also had a farm on the Rio Grande River, U.S. side. And he had 3 farms, and then when he moved into town, it's about the time my father, their youngest of the three boys, got married, and they gave him the original farmhouse and the land there. And by that time, there were all fruit trees here and there on the farm, but they were no longer raising fruit. They were raising wheat
Okay.
and potatoes. We had Irish potatoes, and the truck drivers that came for them had, during the summers, told us many times that we had more potatoes than any one farm in Idaho.